There we go. Hello. Welcome, everyone. We'll let everyone join. Get some people into the webinar. Give it a couple of minutes. Like I said, we've got about 70 people signed up today, so we'll see where the final numbers end up sitting. Nathan, you're the events man, aren't you, with dropouts and things? You're usually the guy I would refer to for benchmarks on this kind of thing. You know the numbers.
No, I sent a really passive-aggressive email to people this morning being like, we're running an event on Wednesday. Now is your time to pull out. If you don't pull out by midday, I'm assuming you're coming. Aside from charging them, I don't know what else. Maybe I'll just call them out publicly on LinkedIn and be like, you booked in, you didn't show, you're a disgrace.
I think it's a good idea. A name and shame list. That's the way to get people on board.
Definitely.
Cool. Right. Well, we'll start cracking on. Obviously, people can join as we go. We'll do intros and go around and sort of introduce everyone and then get into our questions. But thank you everyone for joining us today and to all of our panelists as well for finding time. My name's Carl. I'm CEO and co-founder at Hewitt Matthews. We're a digital performance agency. And this webinar is off the back of our ebook we did with some of our lovely expert contributors on the call today about trends in digital advertising. We explored kind of the big shifts that we're all seeing from various different angles. And so today we're going to talk about those changes and what we saw across things like AI being a big one, creativity, data, measurement, and discuss what is reshaping in all those different areas, but most importantly, what brands can do about it in the digital advertising space. So on the call with us today, I'll go around and do some quick bios and intros. First off, we've got Barnaby Winter with us, who is a marketing and brand creation expert, keynote speaker, multi-book author, I might add, and founder of the Brand Bucket. Barnaby works with C-suite leaders to make sure the marketing is at the heart of business strategy. So thank you very much for joining us today, Barnaby.
Pleasure.
On the call, we've also got Dr. Ioana Stojka from the University of Bedfordshire. Ioana is a digital marketing lecturer and also has a PhD in place branding, as well as being a consultant and researcher in the space as well. So again, thank you very much for being here. Additionally, we've got Matt, who's the VP of Marketing at Infinity. They're a very close partner of ours and have been for a long time. In fact, our first PPC account we ever worked on, we had Infinity call tracking software on there. And Infinity works for call tracking and conversation analytics, and is massive when it comes to attributing the outcomes of phone calls in digital channels to revenue. We've also got Jamie and James, the co-founders of the Inbox Club, on the call with us as well. Based up in Norwich, these guys are an email marketing agency and have a brilliant podcast as well. So if you get a chance, go and check that out. Also backing up the rep for Norwich today, we've got Nathan from Quickfire Digital, e-commerce master and co-founder of Quickfire, who are a Shopify premium agency, working with a number of different household brands as the man when it comes to e-commerce. And lastly, we've got Reese Leggett on the call, who's a business and incubation and growth manager at University of Lincoln, working with students and graduates to help them turn their business ideas into reality. So thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate it. Today, we're going to go through some of the key topics from the ebook. If you've got any questions for anyone watching, please submit them as we go. We're going to make sure all questions get answered. We'll be collecting them and sending answers out privately if we don't get to answer them on the call. So ask anything and everything, and we'll do our very best to get back to every single one of you. So to start with, we're going to start with the big topics today, which is AI and automation. And we're going to be talking to Barnaby, Ioana, and Reese on these ones. Obviously, it's reshaping a whole host of different aspects of everything we do in digital advertising today. But one of the big ones to start with is, Barnaby, in the book, you talked about AI augmentation versus automation, kind of how it shapes processes and supports them versus sometimes just taking them on entirely. But I feel like a lot of people use AI in quite tactical individual situations rather than looking at the bigger picture. Where should businesses begin if they want to use AI a little bit more strategically rather than tactically?
But I think that the main part of AI, right as we are right now, is it's really developed to a point where it can really take a lot of task, a lot of effort out of effectively what we're all doing when it comes to a brand, which is building relationships with our customer base. So the best way to use AI right now is to really analyze the journey that your customers make into your business, to turn that into a process and a system, and then evaluate the process and the system in a way which goes, well, what could AI help us do better and deliver higher quality work for the customer, and ultimately where you can augment something you're already doing. And what I mean is that the human works alongside the AI all the time, so they literally work in partnership. So effectively what they're doing is they're developing the customer relationship to be stronger and stronger, and eventually you get to a point where actually you don't need the human, and that's when you can automate. So the critical thing is to develop your systems, to develop your processes, but really start with what your customer wants rather than the way you want to do things. And what I've seen quite a lot of is AI is being applied to things which probably don't make any difference to the customer, and the new research is showing that it's making the staff work harder, feel more stressed, and actually it's not improving productivity at all, because actually people aren't starting with the very basics of what's the journey, what's the product that we're selling, what's the service we're selling from an agency point of view, but from most of all a customer experience point of view.
Brilliant, thank you. And yeah, obviously a brand and that sort of space is really your specialism, I suppose. And I think it's a difficult one with AI usage in brand space, because it's such a human thing to build that trust and authenticity. And so which aspects of brand and customer experience do you think that AI just can't replicate?
Well, I think the perception of value is defined by product quality, service quality, price paid, and ease of doing business. And I think the thing that makes people feel much more engaged is that human element of any particular relationship. So what I think you'll find that as you develop your systems and process, you'll find there are parts where humanity is critical to the building of trust, the building of confidence, the building of engagement, and ultimately the desire to part with people's cash and give it to you instead. So the things that really AI will find very, very hard to replace is that human interaction. And in truth, that means that there are many activities that humans enjoy with other humans. And so therefore, until the robots have got the AI embedded and look identical to human beings, I think we're some way off being able to replace that. So again, it's just making sure that using AI to replace all the mundane, the standard tasks, and that allows you to then invest more energy in the humanity in the relationship with your product or with your service. And I think those are the bits that AI are really going to struggle to replace right now.
Yeah, and we'll get onto personalisation a little bit later as well, but I think that's a really interesting topic where that comes in, and you've got to strike that balance correctly. I know, Ioana, you've done some research into the use of AI, and what sort of patterns have you seen or behaviours when smaller brands start trying to use AI for the first time?
Yeah, so I think one of the most consistent patterns that I observed in small to medium-sized businesses is actually the way they approach AI. I think initially they are a little bit skeptic about using it, but then once they start using it, they're starting to be very curious and explore a little bit more. So many business owners perceive AI either too complex initially, or they don't really know the resources that they need in order to embed AI in different processes within their organizations. So that's why they're a little bit skeptical about it. But once they see practical demonstrations, once they start generating some content for their business using AI, then they are a little bit more confident, and they see the impact that it can have within their business. So their perceptions actually are shifting towards being more excited to use it. And I think that's particularly important, that adoptions of AI for small to medium-sized businesses is actually incremental, not overnight. It doesn't happen overnight. So most small businesses will start using AI mostly for content creation or drafting emails, or making that first draft or brainstorming ideas for content. But then after they're confident with that, they will explore more things that they can do with AI. And I think that's very important at this stage, that they will start practicing, and once they get used to the softwares, to different platforms, they will pick what's working for them. But it's always important, as Barnaby mentioned, that there is a collaboration between human and AI, and they don't really fully rely on AI alone.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's that thing of slow, incremental, not necessarily slow, but at least incremental implementation of AI. And it's actually not expected that you need to do everything overnight, but rather get it right and do it properly than try and have this massive step change. And I think that's a big one when it comes back to, again, Barnaby's point around kind of authenticity and the brand experience using AI. How do you think marketers can strike that balance between obviously gaining efficiency with AI, but then maintaining that genuine human connection at the same time?
Yeah, I think this question goes to the heart of AI debate in marketing. I think efficiency and authenticity are often framed as opposite forces, but in my view and in my research suggests that they're not mutually exclusive. I think the key distinction is understanding where AI can add value and where human oversight remains essential. So AI is incredibly effective at accelerating the production process, generate ideas, overcome creative blocks, help marketers create prototypes very quickly. However, I think efficiency alone does not create emotional resonance that brands need nowadays. So authenticity will always come from human interpretation, from the alignment between that content and the brand identity. So I think authenticity today is less about if AI is involved or not in the content creation, but most about the quality of human oversight. And authenticity lives in the editorial judgment, not necessarily in the initial drafts that AI can create on its own.
Yeah, fantastic. I agree. I think that's really interesting way to put it, that authenticity and efficiency don't necessarily have to be opposing forces. And you mentioned there as well about the production of content and sort of productivity using AI. And Reece, this is one actually to come to you for. You mentioned about how AI can sort of help to address the UK's productivity gap and might be a good solution for that. In your opinion, what is the most sort of practical way that SMEs can start to use AI more effectively to increase productivity? Because it's a good leveler in the sort of economy.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things, and has been mentioned, is that there's a fear sometimes of a confidence and a knowledge gap to how to use it effectively, which is holding back some of those SMEs from truly utilizing the technology. I think it's starting small, maybe identifying some of those initial pain points. So, what is a pain point within the business? How could AI help to automate that process? So it could be simple administrative tasks. So starting with that kind of email drafting, that kind of reports, those things that take time, but actually the outcome is the analysis of it rather than the production of it sometimes. So starting small with those pain points. We've seen a lot of AI chatbots to kind of break down some of those initial inquiry processes that people have. And so I think starting small, but measuring as well. So when you're implementing a new technology like that, measuring how much it's improved some of that time frame that you're taking or would have taken if it was a human answering that same question. So yeah, I think start small and then grow from there as the confidence grows with the technology.
Yeah, nice. And I think leads me on to my next question. And as you say, with the technology growing and developing, I think training and education kind of also needs to evolve alongside that to make sure that it adapts, but also we can continue doing the same, because it's different every day at the moment, it feels like. How do you feel education and training sort of needs to change to be able to fit that pace of change?
Yeah, I think we still teach students in a way, and this is across schooling through to university, in the ways that we would have taught them in the initial industrial revolution. It's almost like factory style learning of in a classroom, all sat in the same kind of seats and listening to a teacher at the front who's then giving that information. I think this kind of technology is very much trial and error. It's giving students an opportunity to utilize it, teaching them those ethical approaches to using it. So how it can really help their knowledge gain, but also mix the traditional with the new. So I think we do need to teach AI literacy, very much so, in terms of how to utilize it, how to get the best from it. But I think about moving it from kind of that continuous learning, so making it a continuous learning tool. So how do we upskill current staff into using it? Often we know that actually with a student of any age, it's the barriers of confidence that will stop them from learning and really making the most of that. So I think education is moving into a point of, we probably can't beat the technology, in terms of some of the tools we've got now. So it's how do we embed it better and allow students to feel like they can utilize it in a way that's going to help them retain the knowledge and then get better at that analysis. We think about, I don't know how many of in this webinar still utilize mental arithmetic now, or would use a spreadsheet even to automatically calculate things. So, we've just got to recognize that that is the way the world's going, but it's how do we use it in a safe way? And you've probably seen some of the discussions in Munich and others about how different countries are approaching that teaching and learning of it. So I think it's an interesting space, but definitely we need to look at a new modern way of educational delivery that doesn't look like it did 50 years ago.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. It's funny how teaching is kind of the one thing where the delivery has not changed in a long, long time. And I think actually it's interesting as well, because I know like Matt, for example, over at Infinity, you guys do a lot of really good training content, to be honest, and webinars and ebooks and resources to help people stay up to date. And actually that's quite a useful resource perhaps for the more traditional education space, is to start pulling on what agencies and software providers and real businesses are putting out there. So that could be an interesting link up there. But obviously, Matt, at Infinity, you guys talk a lot about cookieless and what that sort of really means, and first party data is a big part of your day, because obviously you guys are trying to link this digital advertising space to offline calls and then trying to close that loop and bring it all back together, which is a really difficult one. And as part of that, you talked about kind of moving from these data lakes to data clarity in the book. And one of the questions I want to ask you, and Mike, because I know we've worked on this a lot together, is what steps can marketers take to take their first party data and turn it into something more genuinely useful when it comes to digital advertising?
Yeah, and I think this is a really nice follow on really from all the conversation about AI, because the data is such a fundamental part. It's the bedrock, it's the foundation to being able to utilize this technology well, in the same way that we wouldn't want to implement something without having a clear objective that's meaningful and relevant to us, right? And this is what I see with data all the time. We're not by any means in a period of time where we're data poor. But what I do think we are is I think we're signal poor, for want of a better word. And I think we've got a lot of noise, and I think we've got a lot of data for data's sake. And we're not actually doing a super effective job as marketing teams, generally speaking, at going, actually, what signals do we need to put into these tools and into this technology to get the results that we want? Because to everybody's points previously, it works best when it's guided, right? And guided with good quality data. So that's where the first party data for me is always super valuable. That's the thing that I think is super valuable about Infinity as a solution, getting that full picture, not just the online conversions, but offline as well. Because I think the reality is, when we think about optimization for digital campaigns, there's a tendency to gravitate towards what's easy to measure and easy to leverage. And the one thing that I think's changed for the better in the past sort of 4 or 5 years is how much easier it's become to surface more meaningful data, first party data, that actually goes, hey, is this something that we want to optimize towards or not? Is it a strong signal? Is it a weak signal? And when I think about the broader challenges as well, about most marketers dealing with tighter budgets and higher expectations, it's really important that we tune in and we think, actually, how can we identify the data that we want to leverage, which is where my comment about clarity came from in the book, really. Which signals are actually driving outcomes that we care about, what's converting to a sale, what is a valuable lead that we're paying to put in the pipeline, and how can we as marketers zoom in on that data and leverage it much more effectively when we think about building our optimization loops. So I think it's a mindset shift almost, where we have to go, actually, it's not about collecting more data. It's about starting to give more structure to the data that we want to leverage. What's good intent, what's good outcomes, and how does that actually help us sort of qualify what a good lead is and isn't, before we start just fueling that back into a system.
Yeah, and there's so many data points you could try and collect and do something with and measure everything for the sake of measurement's sake, but you've really got to have that clarity on what you're measuring and why, and what you plan to do with it, what insights you want to get from that. And what I find really interesting with Infinity, and obviously the work that we've done together for a long time now, is you take a lot of data that's actually typically offline from phone calls and then help people feed that back into optimization, sort of in platform, and then feeding AI platforms with that as well to learn more. How are you seeing the best brands use that offline data at the moment?
It's a really good question. For me, it always boils down to intent, right? So this is why I love the phone call as a touch point, because you don't make a call by accident. I'm sure we've all done it. We've filled in a form and gone, all right, yeah, I'll give you my email address because I want something, but I'm not. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm in buy it now mode. Whereas if I'm committing to picking up a phone and making that leap, that's actually a really strong signal that as a marketer, I should be tuned into and caring about, to be able to sort of go, hey, these are the types of good quality data, these good quality signals that I should be using. And really, this is what I see the best brands doing. They're really focusing on the intent and the outcome associated with interactions. So a lot of them are using AI tools. We've got a ton in our platform, obviously, but to classify whether there is an appropriate intent and appropriate outcome, which is particularly useful when you're not in an industry where there's a very short transactional sales cycle, because the challenge with that is you could be waiting months before you get an outcome that you can feed back into your bidding platform. They're really focusing on actually how can we use data to identify if there's a positive intent that signals it's a good quality lead and we want more of those going into the system. And when people start optimizing with that data, and we're just guiding those AI tools a little bit more effectively, so Google's Performance Max is a great example. When we focus on a meaningful input in terms of the signals that we're using to optimize, that's when you see some great results. Like there's a brilliant case study on our website at the minute for Stoneacre, and they got 300% more sales ready leads coming in just by refining the signals that they were using. Again, thinking about intent and outcome. A great example, Fred Olsen Cruises as well, 37% more revenue year on year from PPC. So again, this is where I'd encourage every marketer who's wanting to get the best out of these tools, not just to think about throwing more data in, but really thinking about what the data we're putting into those systems actually signals and what it means for us. That's the distinction I'd say that separates good and average from great.
Brilliant. Yeah, fantastic. There's a reason, we've been working together for so long, and we always do work together on webinars and, like I say, ebooks and stuff. It works fantastically well. So definitely explore that. I think another big use case for first party data, which everybody's talking about and is a big buzzword, especially with a lot of our clients. We work with a couple of D2C brands, but actually quite heavily in regulated industries. And funnily enough, personalisation is quite a big thing in that space, and is a hot topic of conversation at the moment. Obviously, Jamie, James and Nathan, this is very much kind of in your guys' wheelhouse, and especially the Inbox Club boys with email. I think you mentioned in the book that a lot of people need to go a little bit more beyond the surface level personalization as well. There's hi first name is kind of your basic ground zero, and then on from there. But James, you mentioned that a lot of brands are only doing sort of token personalization a lot of the time. What are the biggest misconceptions about personalization that you see today?
Yeah, I think there is this sense amongst some email marketers that using a first name or sending the right product recommendation at the right time is like job done as far as personalization goes. There's maybe an underestimation of the intelligence of the recipient. I think that's maybe one of the key takeaways here, is that there are still quite a lot of marketers that think that their email recipients are morons. And I think we have to give more credit to our email subscribers and understand now that the inbox is quite a cynical place and it's quite a savvy place. And actually people can see through your your tokenistic personalization, your use of a first name, your timing of your abandoned cart email. All of these things might be helpful, and I'm not decrying them by any means. Every brand should have them, but it's not going to make someone's day. Let's dismantle any illusion that like you're going to be your recipient's best mate because you reminded them that they abandoned their cart. Like, this is standard stuff now. I actually want to make the point here that regardless of how, and Jamie, I think we'll talk a little bit more about some of the technical stuff. Regardless of how technical your personalization is, regardless of its sophistication, there are some basic things that if you're not doing it, your personalization is going to fall flat and it's going to look disingenuous. The first of those is using a no reply email address. Effectively, when we're doing that, what we're saying is, we want to talk to you, but we don't actually want to hear back from you at all. Like, imagine walking into a shop and you're like, oh, you're right, first name, and then don't ask me any questions. Like, that would just be such a weird experience. You would take your money somewhere else in that instance. So I think, turning up in the inbox with a genuine enthusiasm for wanting to hear from your individual subscribers is a huge part of personalization and part of what makes those more techie methods feel genuine. If you're using a no reply email, you're immediately saying, I don't really want to hear from you. The second thing, and this is baffling for me that brands do this, if you get a reply, you should be buzzing. Like, there should be an alarm that goes off in your office that is like, we just got a reply. Like, this is great. Like, this is exactly what you want. This is why you're sending emails. Remember what the original idea of an email was. It was to converse, right? We want to get these replies. When we get them, reply to them. And I think one problem that a lot of brands face is that there is no one allocated in the business to reply to these emails, right? Because your chatbot isn't going to reply to them. Maybe your email marketer isn't going to reply to them. So they kind of slip through the cracks a little bit. This is an incredibly important touch point. This is where you can create lifetime customers. Just reply, have that conversation. It's not scalable, but we need to start seeing the inbox as a trust channel rather than just somewhere where you broadcast what you want to say. The third thing is your welcome email. It's a little bit cliche, but the welcome email is super important. And in this world of hyper-personalization, it's more important than ever. We've already seen, you guys have probably seen this already in your inboxes, AI is starting to have a role in terms of how our inboxes are ordered. Suddenly, it's not just the time that you're sending your email that puts you top, it's the relevance, it's the likelihood of your recipient actually engaging with your email that's going to give it more or less prominence. The welcome email is a great opportunity to set your stall out. So don't just give a discount code, because again, that's a huge opportunity lost. I actually want to very briefly, I realize I've gone on, just read an example of an awesome welcome email. It was actually part of a welcome flow that I got from, James May of Top Gear fame. He's got a gin brand. This is one of the opening line to one of the welcome emails that he sends. It says, "You were kind enough to subscribe, but you haven't actually bought anything yet. Perhaps you bought some other gin by accident and now you're feeling unwell." So that is an example of, there's no personalization there, right? Apart from the fact that they know that I haven't bought anything, which is fairly simple stuff. There's no first name, anything like that. And yet I feel heard. I feel like there's a personal connection now. It's not a no reply email. I can reply to that. Suddenly, that any personalization that's used feels genuine now, because the messaging has some intentionality behind it. They've tried to relate to me. They're using that familiar tone of voice that anyone who knows James May will be familiar with. This is real personalization, in my opinion.
Amazing. Yeah, I love James May, and it makes me very happy to know that his digital marketing is strong. So that was the last thing I would put him next to. So that's made me happy. Thanks, James. Yeah, Jamie, obviously James mentioned there that you might be able to talk some more technical detail, but in terms of like tactical things that people can do, what's one of the more creative tactics you've seen that consistently helps your clients be a little bit more authentic while still using data-driven personalization?
Yeah, I mean, that James guy likes to waffle on, doesn't he? But I'll try and be succinct. I think when we think about the creative when it comes to personalization, what we're seeing from our point of view, something that works consistently is stripping back design. And so going through a more raw and authentic approach, not across the board, but for these high impact messages. So where we say, okay, well, we have an email in our welcome series, automated, email welcome series, or if we have a particularly strong sales message or promotional period that we want to communicate across to our audience, let's strip it back. Let's go plain text, because that feels more authentic. It feels more human. It's more akin to the kind of emails you receive in your inbox that you actually pay attention to and open and respond to. And whenever we employ that tactic for a client, we always see high engagement metrics. We always see high conversion metrics off the back of that as well. The most recent example is in January for a homeware brand. We sent 20 campaigns over the course of a month, and a plain text email from the founder with a bit more storytelling was the second highest performing email in that month, and it doubled the metrics across the board from from average. So, and that's not an anomaly. We see that anytime we employ this tactic. So, how do we create with the creative, with the content? How do we make it look more human? How do we more raw, more authentic? Is the question. And we also see this on ads on social. Right, we have these kind of POV ads now. We have UGC ads, people opening boxes, trying the product, not these kind of super high-end, high-produced videos when it comes to social ads. So we're almost looking at how do we kind of go backwards a little bit in terms of the content and the creative we're putting out, so that we appear more human. And just to touch on that technical piece that James kind of teed me up for, without asking in advance, but just because we're stripping back our creative and we're going for a simpler, more authentic, more raw look, it doesn't mean we can't use a lot of data or AI function to help inform and deliver that at scale. And the guys before were talking a little bit about that, and how they don't have to be at war with each other, they can work together. And segmentation logic is a huge part of that for me. So what do we know about our audience? So if I want to create a campaign, an email campaign, or WhatsApp campaign, or SMS campaign, I shouldn't be opening my campaigns tab to then get the job started. I should go to my segment tab, and I should have a look at what's in there. What segments have I set up? What's being dynamically populated in there? Maybe what I'll find is a bunch of Carl Hewitts who, they've bought kind of beard brand stuff from me, but a lot of the products they bought recently are mustache stuff. And so I know this guy might have a tash. So maybe, okay, now I have a segment of people who have mustache, and I can talk specifically about that. So I think, what is important is how do we segment, and this isn't, I'm not breaking, this isn't new stuff. This is stuff that's been around in marketing forever, right? How do we segment properly? How do we create messages that are relevant and resonate with people? Because that's what feels personal, not, alluding back to the question you asked, James, not tokenism. It's real messaging for real people.
Amazing. I'll send you your £10 for the mention of the tash later on.
Cheers,
well done. Nailed it.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Thank you for that, mate. That's amazing. So obviously we've got Nathan as well on the call, who's the man for e-commerce, where personalization is a big topic of conversation, I'm sure. We've also talked a lot about automation as well, and experiences as a whole. In your opinion, how can e-commerce brands specifically humanize automation a little bit more, especially with data-driven experiences, trying to make them feel warm and authentic without being too robotic, but knowing that, again, they're still data-driven?
I mean, it's a good topic, right? Because so many people at the moment are crowbarring in AI automations and absolutely butchering it. And I think of the tone of voice stuff that, that the Inbox Club guys have done for us in our own emails and for some of the clients I've seen them work with. And I think that's where to start, right? Is that actually do not let the platform power the comms, because when the platform powers the comms, it's so gross, you wouldn't believe. Right. And that doesn't matter if it's WhatsApp, if it's email, if it's on-site messaging, perhaps, if it's cart abandonment messaging, whatever it is, it's up to you to maintain that brand identity and that tone of voice, and not just let the platform do it, because otherwise it just sounds so forced and I guess alien, right? You try so hard to portray a brand, your brand values, the look and feel, the experience, and then you go and fall at the final hurdle by just shoving some piece of tech in and try and get it to do arguably one of the most important parts. So that to me, I think, is horrendous. I mean, the overarching message I would share to people today is remember who's the important person in this process. And too many brands are automating because it saves them a job, but it's actually really poor for the end user, right? And we're losing sight of the importance of the customer in favor of, oh, it saved us 10 minutes in our back end ops, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that bit mustn't go, mustn't be forgotten. I think when you are writing, if you are taking control of those comms, and Jamie and James do it best, it's just like get some personality across. People buy from people, and that's not changing no matter how much tech we've got coming into this world. And I'm sure we'll talk later in the Q&A about whether we're going too far with AI, tech, personalization, automation, etc. But if you are going to communicate, then for God's sake, like own it and be unapologetically you. I think that's so important. Is some people are like play it a bit safe, and it's like just have an opinion, right? Just have a tone of voice, stand by it, stick with it, be confident. And I guess the final piece of this is just that quality over quantity. I think people are using automation to get breadth rather than depth. And I think that to me is something I would really reconsider. Is the reason I see the importance of automation is so you can try and create these kind of what feels like one-to-one communication, and I feel heard. So rather than just trying to stick more people in the hopper, more people in the funnel, more people in the sequence, how can we go deeper with those people to make you feel like you're personally interacting with me and I'm personally interacting with the brand, and I'm not just in some spray and pray mechanic that's trying to drive efficiency in the business?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, actually, is not getting lost in, again, coming back to the efficiency point, not getting lost in how much it can help you as a brand size person, a brand owner, and getting excited all about that, when really the only reason you're really doing that when you get to the crux of it is you're doing it for the customer. You're trying to make more sales, more revenue, but give them a better experience. You've got to keep them in mind the whole time. It's easy to get blinded by, look, I've saved this much time on admin, but sales are tanking. But great, you've saved yourself some time. It's they're not one and the same. So in terms of personalization, then for yourself, where do you see the biggest opportunities across more of the underused touch points, like confirmation pages or those post-purchase journeys, like the welcome emails that the Inbox Club guys mentioned?
Yeah, no, I think post-purchase is probably the most obvious one. I think quite a lot of brands now are doing on-site personalization pre-purchase quite well. And again, it's just like, okay, well, if I'm going to a product that you may also like, or the complementary products or the bundling, etc., is relevant to that product. We're not just trying to shoehorn in any product to drive up AOV. We're trying to genuinely be helpful for the customer. And I think if you look at post-purchase, thank you pages, kind of sequential emails post-purchase, I guess personalization based on lifetime value as well. Like if I've purchased once before, perhaps my comms are going to be different to if I've purchased 1,000 times before. There's a great little tool called Census that we use a lot in the Shopify space, which is a post-purchase survey tool where actually you can ask different questions based on the value you are to the brand. So actually, if you're a subscription customer, you're going to have a different set of questions to if you're a one-time purchase customer. And I think that's really important. So all I would say is, yeah, we touched a little bit about depth rather than breadth. And I go back to that, like, just make sure if you are personalizing post-purchase, you are just making it hyper relevant. And I think that's where brands are falling short, is they're going, oh, we need to personalize. I'm just going to stick a blanket. You may also like carousel on the thank you page. And you go, well, okay, but actually the product you're recommending someone to go and purchase is the product they've just purchased. So you've kind of defeated the point, and then it feels icky and forced, etc. So if you're going to do it properly. The other thing is, if you go beyond post-purchase, is what are the channels? So email, I would say, is getting better at personalization, and the Inbox Club guys can talk about that. But certainly WhatsApp, I see is another channel that more and more brands are adopting. And I go, okay, if you are adopting WhatsApp, then how can you get that personalization across on there as well? So back to that, I'm not just broadcasting a message to 10,000 customers. I'm trying to really make it look, I'm communicating with you as an individual. This is what I think is going to be helpful. Here's some aftercare tips for your specific purchase that you've just made, not just here's a story about how the brand started. It goes a bit more in depth.
Perfect. Amazing. Thank you very much. That's really helpful. And we've got about 5 minutes for Q&A at the end here, but I think some of the key things we pulled out there around sort of AI and how authenticity and efficiency can work together, and the incremental implementation of that kind of stuff. The being intentional about your first party data, stripping things back to storytelling, keeping customers in mind. A lot of it says to me that a lot of the thinking is still the same, but it's the tools that are different and the actual implementation on the ground that's changing. But if you've still got that strategic mindset and you're looking at it a little bit more holistically, then you should be in a good place. And also to not put too much pressure on yourself to do everything overnight and catch up with all the things that are changing, because you never will. But I think if you've got that thinking there, a lot of the hard work is done. It's now just how you use those tools that's changing. So we'll open things up to Q&A. We've got one or two pre-submitted questions as well. But if anyone wants to put any questions in the chat, feel free. I'll start with one of the first questions we got sent in, which was around, we're a small marketing team. How should we actually start with AI without risking wasting loads of budget or time? Interested to hear who wants to take that one. Anyone feel like that's one for them?
I can dive in if you don't mind. I think this is a bit of a simple, boring answer though for me, to be honest, where it's about starting with that relevant outcome. I think there's a danger with any new technology where people get blinded by it and we think we need to adopt because it's what everybody's doing, but it's not actually adding value and it's not actually improving a system or a process that's going to help us move closer to the end goal and achieve something. I mean, ultimately for marketers, it's Romy, right? We want to operate and attract revenue as efficiently as possible. If we can't identify a way to do that, I always sort of think, well, we should really be questioning the action that we're taking. So my advice would be sit down and really think, if you've not got a ton of money to spend on implementing a solution, what's the most effective thing I could do with the available budget that will help move me towards a meaningful outcome?
Okay. Thanks very much, Matt. Anyone else want to weigh in on that one before we move on to the next question? All good.
Carl, I think if you're a small agency, what your business plan doesn't require a lot of clients. It doesn't need a lot of business to fund it. So therefore, what I think I would do is I would really niche down the profile of the ideal prospect that you want to engage with, and use AI to do the research to enable you to really create a robust, fulfilling, enriched relationship with the marketplace that you're going for. That's actually a really good use of AI, is to really find out. So if you're going to target a particular type of client or do all the research, use AI for that. And actually that's a really useful use of AI, because you're effectively embedding understanding and empathy into the relationship that you want to build with the marketplace, and then go and really take that content out into the market and say you really empathize and understand with your prospect. They're more likely to then come to you and say, can you help us?
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. We use it a lot for research as well, internally when it comes to audience research. It's a really great tool for that and speeds up that process massively. So definitely a good place to start. We've had a question in the chat about, is there a role for AI in testing creative, copy, or journeys? Has anyone had any experience with that?
Yeah, I have. We use a tool called WebEyes, web and then EYEZ. And I think there's absolutely, like, particularly with the e-com, sometimes you might not even know there's a problem in the user journey until it's too late. And so you could be losing hundreds, if not thousands of pounds in sales on the basis that something is broken, that there's a deeper issue. And so having something running automated in the background that's constantly testing core user journeys, I think is really important. And I absolutely see a use for it. I love the theme that I think most people have talked about, where AI, automations, all this good stuff is great when there's a use case for it. And it's not just a case of, oh, it's the latest buzz, we have to do it. It's like, give me a genuine business case. And then for sure, there might be a need for AI. Testing might be one of them, but also there might just be a daily practice that says the e-com team is going to go through and check the site and make sure it's transacting properly, or there's going to be some other monitoring tool in place. But for me, WebEyes is worth a look, Lee, if that's something of interest.
That's it. Cheers, Nathan. Anyone else got any thoughts on that one before we move on to the last question?
I think it could be...
Just to add on, yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, Joanna. You go. No, you go.
And just to add on that, what I do with very small businesses, startups, but also with my students in the classroom is like test different hypotheses. It's like different scenarios for the business. So I create like, let's say, 1-page summary of a scenario, and then I give it to you even in ChatGPT or Copilot and ask, what if this business is going to do this? What will be the outcomes, or what are the possible outcomes? And then I ask the businesses or even the students to kind of decide between different outcomes and what they want to achieve for their business, and kind of make a judgment. So in like testing different scenarios and their possible outcomes.
Brilliant, thank you. And Matt, did you want to weigh in on that one as well?
Yeah, only a tiny bit. Really, for me, stress testing some of the logic behind some of the creative decisions that we're making. I think this is a really good sort of following point from the one that Barnaby was making about really sort of focusing down and understanding what creates value for a particular audience. We can almost build a logic check. ChatGPT is a good tool for this when we think about building projects and really leaning into the role playing element that AI LLMs like that are very good at doing. And again, just feeding into the points about personalization, it's most engaging when the value is relevant that we're trying to communicate, and just being able to sort of train something to go, actually, let's really stress test this. It can be a great tool for soundboarding. It's not it doesn't have to be complex, but it's great just to go fundamentally, are we saying something that's going to add value and incite the action that we want somebody to take? So I think that can be a really good way of doing that as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Matt. So last question, we're just running a little bit over, so we'll crack through. But last question was one we got about what's one of the most common parts of digital advertising that you see most brands overcomplicating? I thought this was a really interesting one. Has anyone got any thoughts on that immediately?
Probably with the one that I think gets overcomplicated is what I said about putting, especially if you're a small brand, getting the founder in front of the camera, just doing stuff. I think that gets overcomplicated, maybe for like maybe more emotional reasons than technical reasons. But just, you've got an iPhone, just hit record, film some stuff, show the product, generate your own UGC if you don't have any yet. I think that is something that people overcomplicate, and it's just getting over that a little bit and just, get some raw, authentic content out there that people are actually going to want to watch. And, not pressing go on your content and not pressing go on your ads because you can't get over that is probably one thing that I see as overcomplicated.
Brilliant.
That's a good shout, actually, Jay. It's like that perfection is the enemy of execution, right? And there's all these marketing teams with big brand books and kind of hurdles and red tape that says you can't do this, etc. And they're so worried about what they can't do that they forget what they can do, and then they end up doing nothing, and they have this decision paralysis where they just don't execute. So yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that like I say, perfect is the enemy of done. You never get it underway. Go on, Barnaby. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. No, it's okay. The other thing I see often happen is AI wants to be generalist and generic. It has its natural inclination to kind of provide answers that work across the board. Actually, if you think about most businesses, the more you can niche the messaging, the relationship, the engagement, the more likely you are to be successful. So I think one of the big things that you have to watch out for is that AI can sometimes come across as the outputs from that is just a bit too generic. And I think what you really want to do is really force it down pathways as if you almost know the person on the other end of the message. And really, that's personalization is actually just making the person feel at the other end it's only about them, the message. And AI has this tendency to be much wider than it really needs to be. And I think that's something that instinctively the agencies of old used to understand and get very, very tight, whereas AI kind of breaks that open again. So you have to be really, really careful about that, because otherwise you just end up spending a lot of money on broadcast messages that really nobody resonates with, rather than really tightening it down to get people to say, that's for me, I'm in, I'm going to give you my money.
Yeah, brilliant.
I think another. So I know we're running out of time. Just a classic thing that I've seen a fair amount of recently. So maybe it's just recency bias. Is people just forgetting that you can just ask, you can just talk to your customers, you can just ask them stuff. Like it sounds super basic to point out, but you know, I think it's very easy to get so into the data and to draw out all these things and to actually forget that you can just speak to the actual human as well buying the thing, or who might buy the thing, and just say, what do you think? Like, what do I need to do to this product that will mean you'll buy from me? You know, why aren't you buying at the moment? What did you think to that product? Was it good? Did it do what you wanted it to do? You know, just actually speaking to your customers, whether you're picking up a phone, whether you're sending them an email, whatever it might be, speaking to your customers, I think is, whether you're a huge business or a small one, something that's criminally overlooked.
Perfect. Thank you, James. Cool. Well, unless anyone else has got anything to tag on the end, we'll wrap things up there. But thank you again to all of our panelists and contributors to the ebook for giving up your time twice now in 2 different formats to share your knowledge with everyone. There's been a lot of really interesting key takeaways there. I think a big one for me, though, that sort of boils down to is very much about being intentional about your use of a lot of these emerging trends and developments, and making sure that you're not just using it because you think you should and it's hype and it's what the latest thing is. Really consider why you're using it, what the outcome you want, or what the outcome is that you want to see from it, and then make a good business case for it. So thank you very much, everyone. If you haven't read the Emerging Trends Digital Advertising ebook, we'll send out a link, and it is on our website, so feel free to download that for the full thing. Connect with all of our panelists on LinkedIn if you've got any questions direct. And of course, if you want to speak to any of us, please do feel free to reach out and book a chat. But for now, that's everything from all of us. Thank you to all of our panelists and everyone watching live as well. Really appreciate all your time. Thanks a lot. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.